Hello, everyone. Welcome to our award spotlight conversation around framing Britney Spears, hosted by film critic Christy Lemire. Really excited to have you all here today. My name is Cassidy Diamond. I am the Associate Director of Public Programs and Events here at the International Documentary Association. And as always, I'd like to offer a brief land acknowledgement before we begin today. Today, I'm coming to you from my home in Los Angeles, which is on the unceded land of the Tongva and Chumash people, who have been stewards of this land for generations. I would also like to give thanks to our media sponsor, Variety, for bringing this series to all of you today. We're really excited to have them on board this year. You can find out more of our screenings at documentary.org/award spotlight. And there you can find all of our upcoming screenings. We run all the way up until the second last week of June. And before I hand it over to Christy, I just want to thank Andrea, as always, for being our amazing interpreter and guiding us through this series. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Christy, and we can get started with this great conversation. Welcome, Christy.
Unmute myself.
No
worries. I just did the thing we said we weren't going to do, which is talk while muted. So hello.
It still happens a year into the pandemic and we still do it. It's fine.
We're super high tech here at IDA. I'm Christy Lemire. I'm a longtime film critic. I'm with RogerEbert.com and the Breakfast All Day podcast and lots of other places. And I'm so excited to talk about framing Britney Spears with these brilliant women who put it together. We will start with Liz Day, who's the editor. Come on, Liz Day. Hi, there you are. Good to see you. Producer director Samantha Stark. She is there somewhere. Hi, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. And Mary Robertson, the showrunner and executive producer. Come on, Mary, there you are. Good to see you. Hi. I have so many questions, and I know you've been asked so many questions. So I'm really looking forward to a lively conversation with you guys. But I got to start by asking, because this is a living, breathing thing still that you guys made a film about. What is the current status of Britney Spears' conservatorship?
She's still in it. It exists. You know, there have been several hearings since the film came out. Her father is still in charge of her finances. She is, I guess, do you want to take it, Liz?
Sure. Yeah. The next hearing is June 23rd. And at the last hearing a few weeks ago, Britney's court-appointed counsel said that Britney herself has requested to address the court. So Britney is going to speak to the court at this next hearing on June 23rd, which is very unusual. This rarely happens during the entire 13-year span of the conservatorship. So, you know, we're all eagerly watching to see what she's going to say and what's going to happen.
And also, and in the meantime, you know, at the last hearing, her mother had objected to the almost $1 million that her father had spent on lawyers in the 4 months before that. But that got continued, as well as questions about her capacity to make medical decisions. So they have pushed along a lot of the things that they were supposed to talk about in the past hearings since the film came out.
It's kind of mind-boggling, and you guys touch on this among many topics in the film, that she is paying the legal fees for both sides of this. Like, they're milking every little last bit of money out of her they possibly can, which is kind of galling. What do you guys make of the fact that she is speaking at this upcoming hearing? Is it an indication somewhat of a bit of freedom for her, or is it just that she hasn't wanted to speak previously? What's that about, do you think?
It's really hard to predict what's going to happen. I'm still waiting to see if she actually will speak, you know, because oftentimes something will be presented as if it's going to happen, and then it gets either continued or it doesn't happen. I hope she does speak. It would be incredible. The other thing to note is that she could have spoken in many hearings. It's unclear how much she knows about what she could do or could not do. So we'll see what happens.
Mhm. Right, like how much information are they making available to her as she tries to make her decisions here? So your film came out a few months ago, about 3.5, almost 4 months ago, but it also has been staying alive in people's consciousness because celebrities keep getting asked about it, including, Justin Timberlake when it first came out, and he had to apologize for, the way things shook out with their relationship. And then most recently, Pink was asked about your movie because she has her own documentary out, which is an extremely different kind of music documentary. What has it been like for you guys as filmmakers to have this remain in people's minds?
I wonder how long it will continue.
That's-
Let's all be talking about it 2 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's enormously gratifying. It is surprising. It is astonishing. And I think the conversation around the film has morphed and evolved through time. I think that in the beginning there was this awareness of the audience's complicity in sort of perpetuating, creating, designing the circumstances that may have contributed to Britney's circumstances ultimately. And I think to some extent that sort of mass acknowledgement of complicity was something I'd never seen before. There was nothing that I saw that was defensive. There was no one who stepped forward and said, well, I didn't do it, or I think that the three of us include ourselves among the complicit to varying degrees, but understand that we may have laughed at certain jokes that we shouldn't have laughed at, or failed to question some of what we should have questioned at the time. But as you were saying, Christy, the conversation has moved beyond that, and it's gratifying to see the conversation become a living, breathing thing. Maybe Liz and Samantha want to pick that up.
Yeah, we have a little email thread with various, contributors to the film, and, people chime in. It used to be every day. Now it's every few days with, oh, Jessica Simpson spoke about the documentary, or, Jennifer Love Hewitt was asked about in an interview. And I'm continually very surprised to see people reckoning with either their, first person participation in Britney's story back in the day, or just their, them going through a similar experience. Like I think Jessica Simpson had said, I can't watch it. It's like triggering to me, or the parts that I did see were triggering. Or, Jennifer Love Hewitt spoke about I experienced that same sexualization and I reacted in a way that I now question because I made jokes about my breast size or whatever, because everyone was obsessed. All the male interviewers were obsessed with asking me about that. And I think that that's extremely unusual, and it's really, really interesting to watch happen, and be having created this thing that is causing this conversation that's still evolving is just really something special.
I think something that really hit home with me is something actually Monica Lewinsky said when she was asked in an article that Jessica Bennett wrote for the New York Times following the film. And she said something to the extent of, when you watch that happen to a celebrity person, it's not just the celebrity who's affected. It's, when you allow someone to treat a celebrity like that, you're saying it's okay to treat all of us like that. And so it doesn't just affect the celebrities. It's not something that just happens to celebrities. And I've been questioning a lot, how did that affect my development to watch Britney get treated this way as a peer growing up, because I'm the same age as her. So I think that's also a lot of, not only celebrities, but regular people are talking about their experiences.
One thing that is so infuriating in your movie is looking back at the way in which not just tabloid culture, but mainstream, legitimate, respected veteran journalists, tried to make her cry in interviews or shamed her or judged her. It's amazing to look back at the fact that there was a Family Feud question making fun of her. What for you guys as journalists yourselves, what was the process like of going back and finding all of those kinds of archival clips and assembling them here?
Well, we did have a large team that made the film. Samantha and Liz were at the helm of that team, but we had a large team, and I'm very proud of the fact, and I know Samantha and Liz are too, that we worked collaboratively. That large team includes an incredible archival producer and a small team that worked on her behalf. Her name is Johanna Schiller. And from the onset, once the film was greenlit, she commenced the sort of process of excavation. And I think some of those early, so the Family Feud clip that you reference, the question that's asked, if maybe not everyone remembers it, understandably, the question that was asked was, name something that Britney Spears has lost. And the answers that come up include her hair, her sanity. And there's something I find really chilling about watching the contestants, sort of laugh as they, reach for the right answer, her sanity. And there's this sense that was presented, that these questions and answers were presented without questioning or a degree of consciousness about their cruelty, or that we're referencing a human with feelings probably like our own at the center of it. When we all found we found that clip early in the filmmaking process, and I remember many of us watching it and really, I think, feeling it sort of reverberate throughout our body and understand, perhaps what the audience would ultimately feel when they too revisited these clips that we hadn't seen in 20 years, and really, that we are able to bring fresh eyes to those clips and understand the evident misogyny and cruelty that was, omnipresent. Samantha, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, I mean, we did this whole film during the pandemic. So all of us were kind of sending clips back and forth to each other and watching them, alone in our living rooms. And it was such a, I know we did it a lot where we would watch a bunch. There were fans, Britney Spears fans had made a lot of compilations and posted them on the internet and really helped us dig as well. And we, when I watched that, another one of the answers is her kids. What has she lost? Her kids. And that is something that I think a lot of people, including myself, didn't remember, that she was going through a really hard custody battle while this was happening. And, we also saw a lot of other clips of Britney, even as a teenager, saying her biggest goal was to be a mom. And she had said, we included one in the film, but there were several where she says, oh, I'm going to dance and sing on the side. My real passion is to be a wife and mother. And to know that and then see her be treated that way was so, it was visceral, I think, for all of us. We kept texting each other, I want to throw up while I'm watching this.
Liz, did you have thoughts on that too?
Yeah, I guess I agree with everything Samantha and Mary said, though you also pointed out the mainstream journalists, which I think was a surprise for at least me. I was an avid gossip and tabloid consumer back then, so I didn't expect much from Perez Hilton or TMZ or those websites of paparazzi, but to see, the Diane Sawyer interview, where it was very clear that the interview was structured around kind of holding Britney accountable for the moms out there, or the wife of the governor of Maryland says she would shoot you if she could. And Britney, I hadn't given Britney credit for how good her responses are, much better than mine would have been. If someone said that to me, Britney says, that's horrible. That's a horrible thing to say. I'm not here to babysit anyone's kids. And Diane defends the wife of the governor of Maryland and says, but for the example, because it's so hard to raise a daughter these days, and you're out there, being this bad example. And it was surprising to see, mainstream journalists kind of trafficking in that. And I don't think you would see that today. And the same with Matt Lauer. The rest of that interview is on YouTube. I'd recommend everyone watch it because we only used parts of it. But, he also presents her with tabloid covers and says, they call you white trash. What do you think of that? And it's like, why is he asking her that? What is the purpose of this? And yeah, it's just a really interesting artifact of, it's not that long ago, only 10 years ago, but it feels like just decades and decades ago.
In terms of how like retrograde it is in its treatment of this woman. Also, what did you do to Justin? What did you do to Justin? He's the victim here.
broke his
Hammer River. Yes. Then the flip side of all this horrible treatment is that you have something like Chloe Fineman's sketch on Saturday Night Live, where she's playing Britney Spears and everyone has to come and apologize to her. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, the "We Are Sorry, Britney," before that happened, "We Are Sorry, Britney" was trending on Twitter. And I remember seeing that early in the morning after the film came out and sobbing, because it was exactly what we were going for. And I really had little faith in, that people would get that, because of how easy it was to make fun of Britney, like up until the film came out, it felt like. And so it was really moving. And then of course, Saturday Night Live picked up on that, and having everyone come in and apologize to Britney is like so beautiful.
That must be gratifying to be a big part of that, I would think, for you guys. Yeah.
It is. It's hard because she's in this conservatorship still, and there's still such a tight circle around her enabled by the conservatorship that we don't know actually what she thinks. And so it's like, it feels gratifying, but it feels incomplete in a way.
Right. We're still in the middle of all this. Liz, I know that you went to the other folks here on the team with the idea of making an OJ Made in America about Britney Spears. What about that structure, that tone appealed to you in telling this kind of story?
Totally. So I am around the same age as Britney. So I, in a lot of ways, feel like I kind of grew up with her. I have this very nostalgic connection. When I was in high school, or actually maybe even 8th grade, she debuted on the scene and was just, Miss Perfect, the most beautiful woman in the world. Everyone wanted to be her or to date her. And then, I was in college when she was really going through her public struggles, and just the tabloids and the paparazzi was just, incredibly cruel to her. And so it felt like her story alone, just following that arc, would be really fascinating to tell the story of an American icon, and along the way, tell a story about, power and wealth and the legal system and family dynamics, and just felt really rich. And I was inspired by OJ Made in America in the way that that story also told the singular story of OJ, but zoomed out, and you learned about, race and, again, power and the legal system and so much more. And then lastly, I think that, her conservatorship, this kind of mystery, added this unfolding element that we could follow in real time. Because, conservatorships, as everyone may be aware, are supposed to only be used for people who literally cannot, feed or bathe or clothe themselves. They're a last resort, and they're very extreme. Yet under, Britney's conservatorship, she was able to go and perform in Las Vegas and make millions of dollars and be a huge superstar. So how can those two things be true? That felt like a mystery worth investigating.
Mm-hmm. And Samantha and Mary, what were your thoughts about Britney Spears prior to heading into this project?
Well, Liz mentioned this idea that, as you said, the pitch was, what if we did OJ Made in America, but for Britney Spears? And I thought it was a great idea then. I continue to think it's a great idea. I appreciate the brevity of the pitch. I appreciate the reference to that work, to OJ Made in America, a work which, approached its subject matter with scale and ambition and rigor, and which, began its storytelling decades before the trial, decades before this incident that we all remember, a series of incidents that we all remember. By the time, as a viewer, you were revisiting the trial in the OJ Made in America film, you were bringing fresh perspective, new insights, empathies, and sympathies to it. So this idea of taking a similar approach to Britney, where we rewound decades, began her story at close to her beginning, was very appealing, because it offered the promise that we could bring fresh perspective to these iconic, infamous events in her history, the so-called Umbrella Incident. And then, of course, perhaps also understand the forces that acted on her, that were swirling around her, that certainly influenced her leading up to the inception of the conservatorship. I also think that part of what was so appealing to me about Liz's pitch initially was that it suggested we would take the subject matter very seriously. And that has not always been the case when it comes to Britney Spears. I think there is something sort of magical and deeply inspiring about combining the rigorous journalistic practice that the New York Times is known for with this, subject matter that could be dismissed as pop culture ephemera, or, sort of largely irrelevant to, or not so much largely irrelevant, but trifling. And Samantha, I believe that you also felt that, that there was value, taking it seriously.
Yeah, so I was gifted this story. They had already pitched it and had a whole document and done research, and they presented it to me. And I really wanted to do it, but I was really nervous about it being a story of a woman who was victimized by men. And we really wanted to make something different. I know I kind of came at it I wanted to come at it with a blank slate because I didn't know that much about Britney Spears. And I asked everybody I knew, what's the first thing that pops into your head when you think of Britney? And almost everybody said when she shaved her head. And I had shaved my head before that when I was in my 20s. And it was just so confusing to me why that meant you didn't have to listen to anything she said and she was crazy. And the idea that it's taking away some of your sexual appeal to men as well, it was just disturbing to me. And so the first thought of, framing Britney Spears as what was happening outside that frame of when she shaved her head that everyone remembers. And in our research and reporting, we found, so many misconceptions about Britney. Britney was really a rebel. She was always trying to, make sure that she could be herself and encouraging other people to be herself. She was really bullied and shamed for her sexuality, which means a lot of the fans who are trying to, stand outside the courthouse and make sure she's okay are outsiders who were bullied, a lot of queer people, a lot of people living with mental illness. And it really changed my idea of her. And I know on our first day all together, when we talked about this, we promised we would never make fun of Britney because it was so easy to smirk like, oh, well, she's crazy, right? Like she's ha ha ha. And so we really stuck to that. It was really incredible. Like the entire time, even just amongst ourselves talking about her in the edit, it was really, I think that it was different than anything I had seen about her. And so, yeah. That's what we did.
Well, there was that great article, which I'm sure you guys saw because it was in the New York Times with Sinead O'Connor recently, talking about how she completely related to Britney shaving her head because it's like taking back your idea of what feminine beauty means, right? And so it makes sense in retrospect why she did that in that moment. She didn't want to be the pretty perfect pop star that everyone had foisted upon her, that image. That was sort of an interesting connection going back to Sinead O'Connor and her ideas of what it meant to be a beautiful, strong woman. So kind of interesting. As you're going through all the archival footage and as you're learning about her and you're doing interviews, for all three of you, what surprised you most about her that you didn't know? Samantha, you mentioned the fact that she was kind of feisty and stronger than we perhaps expected. But what along the way did you think, I didn't know that?
Adding on to that, I think so. One thing we decided to do is when we were doing our research, we realized so many of the people in making the coverage of Britney interviewed for the cover about Britney were men. Mm-hmm. And so we just simply decided let's find women and ask them about her. And when we did that, we found a lot of women from early in her career who said, she was creative. She was a really good businesswoman, had a business sense even as a teenager. She really contributed to her work and her look. Teenagers have sexuality. She was totally belittled for her schoolgirl outfit and all of this, but she obviously a lot of young people responded to that because young people are discovering their sexuality. And so I think that really surprised me because the narrative was so different. The narrative was Britney was a puppet who was taken advantage of. And so the idea that so many people independently said this not true, she was a creative collaborator, unfortunately was surprising.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was surprised by Samantha and I get asked a lot, like, oh, were you guys fans of Britney when you were young? And we both had a similar perception of like, no, for whatever reason, like we felt that she had this image, there was this narrative about her that she was a puppet, or, teeny bopper manufactured type of artist. And I was really surprised in going back and just reading every biography of her and watching her, everything ever filmed about her, that she was incredibly hardworking. She was like a pro athlete going out and touring nonstop and doing interviews. And, I came away feeling like she really earned every penny that she made that ironically she cannot control today under the conservatorship her father controls. And I think today we have a real sense of like boss babe and, feminist appreciation for women at the helm of their career and making money and saying no. And I don't think she got credit for that. That was a real, learning, a new learning for me. And likewise, I mentioned it earlier, but I was also surprised by how tough she was. I think a lot of people describe her as very sweet and nice, but when people are asking these like aggressive questions in interviews, her responses are really smart and tough and funny. She kind of gives it right back sometimes. And you see that at times, even in the paparazzi footage, which can be incredibly horrifying. There are moments where she is like, trying to stick up for herself and push back that I think I really respect.
What about you, Mary? How did your thoughts on Britney evolve over this time?
Yeah, and what surprised me about her? Well, there's a clip towards the beginning of the film in which Britney appears on Star Search as a very young girl, and she presents with this, well, certainly with a tremendous amount of charisma and poise, but a tremendous voice. And I was surprised and blown away by that, because I too remember absorbing Britney, and the sort of narrative around her at the time was, yes, that her music was heavily produced, that she was the sort of like pretty face and dancing abdomen that people attached to music that they made in the studio. So I was blown away by her voice. And I think it was important to us to place that clip towards the beginning of the film, I think in part because it might suggest the ways in which she was perhaps situated on a collision course with certain darker tendencies in our culture. And I look at that in that clip, I see her presenting as someone with extraordinary gifts, as a young woman with a certain amount of attractiveness and poise and these extraordinary talents that to some extent meant, I think, that her ascent into the public sphere was inevitable. And in that clip, you also see her, receive these questions from Ed McMahon in which he asked her about her whether or not she has a boyfriend. So in that clip too, you see some suggestion that the culture around her was, dominated by men, and was unprepared to sort of accept her talents with generosity or sensitivity. So I always look at that clip and I think, wow, she had extraordinary gifts, and wow, perhaps to some extent, what we see manifest in the umbrella incident and later in the conservatorship itself was not necessarily or inevitable, but likely.
Yeah, the seeds of everything are all in that one moment there, right? Her incredible gifts and her incredible poise, but also the fact that she's already being objectified by awful men at age 10. It's galling. I was so annoyed when I watched that. I want to talk about all of the interviews that you guys did, because clearly some people are extremely enthusiastic about talking about their time with her, like Felicia, who was her longtime manager, assistant, friend. That clearly she was thrilled to talk about her time with her and really knowing her as a young woman. But then I'm also was very surprised how candid, like, the paparazzi guy is whose truck was part of the umbrella incident. What was it like for you guys in approaching various interview subjects, and what was their various level of willingness?
Well, it was really hard to find people who would speak on camera about Britney. I think there's been a culture of silence around her for a really long time. People have NDAs. People who work in the business maybe are intimidated by her team. There's a lot of legal things happening right now. She's in the middle of a court battle. So lawyers advise people not to speak when that's happening. So we had a spreadsheet Liz helmed that has had over 1,000 names on it of people that we tried to get to speak. And I think one thing is it was really hard for us to know that we likely would not have Brittany's participation in the project. It was a real moral dilemma. And so one thing that we really wanted to do was to make sure nobody made up or tried to tell us what was in Brittany's head at any time, because we don't know what was in Brittany's head. And so we wanted to find people who could speak about her from a very personal perspective, because they were their perspective, or who could speak about our culture and you know, how our culture reacted to her. And so it was actually hard to find. We talked to a lot of people who wanted to tell you their, you know, like almost like thesis on Brittany, like, well, she was thinking this at this time, and she was thinking this at this time, and then she did this because of this. And so those people we would like cancel, you know, cross out right away, because we wanted people who like really wanted to speak. And also we pitched it to them as, you know, there's a lot of misinformation and misconceptions about Britney Spears out there. We want to do something different, and we want to correct the record. We're the paper of record making documentaries. We want to correct the record about Britney. And I think the people who ended up in the film that really spoke to, they really wanted to make sure that we understood the truth about her. And Felicia, you know, hadn't done interviews in many years. She was really hard to pin down. And I think she told me that she decided to do it because she wanted to remind people why they fell in love with Britney in the first place. She really felt like Britney had gotten totally misportrayed, and she wanted to, she felt moved to correct it finally after many years. So yeah.
It's interesting though that Felicia was initially reluctant, because she seems just effusive. Like she's just this ray of sunshine and positivity. So you would think she would be just psyched to be there.
She loves Britney so much. She lives, you know, right in the town next to Britney's, near her. She has a lot of the same, you know, background. And she, I think we had an all-female crew also when we came to film with her. You know, our AP, Melanie Ben Cosme, is one of the people who helped us find people as well. So it was always women calling people. And, you know, yeah, we had 6 of us, I think, went. It was during COVID. Everyone's wearing masks. We had to film outside. But I think that really made people comfortable, because they knew we were doing something different, because everybody commented on that, and no one had ever been interviewed by a, you know, crew of youngish or young, like women in their, we were mostly in our 20s and 30s who came to interview. So they were like, okay, I feel more comfortable now because it's going to be different.
And the setting seemed very peaceful. Your backdrop with all the flowers is very pretty and peaceful. So you've established a nice vibe for folks to feel comfortable, I'm sure. And then, as you just mentioned, and also in the final title card in the movie, you clearly reached out to Britney herself. And the way it's phrased is we are unclear as to whether she received those responses. So what was that whole process of trying to contact her like?
So we tried to contact Britney through every way that we could think of. We, you know, contacted her publicist, we contacted her manager, we contacted her court-appointed counsel in her conservatorship. We sent a message through her Instagram account, who, you know, we don't know whether or not she is in control of. So we tried all various ways, and we did not even get a response. So it was really difficult to know, you know, whether those requests reached her or what. And, you know, I should also add that, you know, in that final title card, we also list everyone else who we tried to reach out to, who either did not respond to or declined to participate. And, you know, we made every effort going in the front door to everyone and saying, we want to hear your perspective. We think it's really important for it to be included in the film, especially her father and her father's lawyers. We made multiple requests for them to appear on camera or to have someone appear on camera to provide their perspective. But ultimately they, you know, did not do that.
Right. And then Britney herself since on Instagram has commented on the few documentaries besides yours that are also out there about her. And she's trying to be positive, and she's saying these films are focusing on the negative from forever ago, and she wants to be positive. And she's also putting out these very cryptic messages about, you know, dancing and happiness and cooking. What do you make of her online response to your movie and to others?
So first of all, we don't know if it's her. You know, a lot of media have covered this as if she said it in a room to them. And we don't know that. She's not even on video doing this. You know, the conservatorship makes it so that they can control everyone who visits her, meaning also like anyone who comes in contact with her. We've seen documents that say that they could monitor her text messages, they control her doctors, every healthcare decision that she has, everything that happens with her money, security 24/7 and who those people are. So is it reasonable that she would be able to put out whatever she wants on Instagram as herself? And I also, it's unclear, you know, from that, if she did write that, she had said she didn't watch the documentary. So she had said, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to imply either way because we have no idea, but when everyone was covering her response to our documentary in the media, like a lot of mainstream media organizations said, Britney said this. What wasn't covered was that the same day, the court documents were made public stating that her father had, you know, spent almost $1 million on lawyers in 4 months to not only defend him against her wishes to be removed, but also to do crisis PR because of the documentary mentioned in name in the paperwork. So crisis, we don't know what crisis PR means, but no news organizations did not cover that. Instead, they covered the Instagram post. Britney.
That is a good point. We don't know that that's true. We don't know that it was her or not. That's a very good point. How do you feel about the theory out there that she's trying to communicate through videos and things? You have a bunch of podcasters and bloggers and giant fans who assume that there's like a cryptic code being disseminated out there. What do you guys make of that theory?
Want to take it, Liz?
Sure. You know, I think as Sam said, we don't know what goes on with her Instagram. You know, we know that there's a digital media firm that, you know, manages her account. But what happens from the time she takes a photo to a caption gets written and send gets hit, we don't know. I think that, you know, a lot of people point out, you know, the Free Britney community is a very large and diverse group of voices. And, you know, people like to point out, oh, well, some people think she's saying, help me in the mascara in her eyelashes. And then, you know, I think people then try to discredit the whole movement just because of, you know, one person may have said that at one point. And I think for me, I was much more impressed coming away with, you know, a lot of the research that's being done and a lot of the lawyers in the Free Britney movement who are like actually doing the same sort of investigative work that we do, you know, pulling court documents and reading and analyzing and, you know, talking to experts to understand what's happening. So, you know, I don't pay too much attention to the analysis of her Instagram and instead try to really focus on, you know, what's happening in court documents, what are sources telling us in interviews.
Mary, any thoughts on that?
Liz and Samantha covered it.
We should wrap soon. One last question though. As people are watching this movie, what do you hope they take away from it in terms of their perception of celebrity, in terms of their perception of mental illness, in terms of their perception of journalistic coverage, any of the above? What do you hope they feel watching this?
Samantha?
I'll just jump in because that's something just popped into my head. I think that, you know, there was a lot of focus on like, you know, Justin Timberlake or what was happening in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And I think that's really interesting to watch. But for me, I'm most interested in like what's happening today and this sparking a conversation around like, who we might be doing this to today and who we might be looking back 5 years from now and saying, oh, everyone was really unfair or, was wrong in how we were perceiving them. And then I'd also say that before this job, I worked at John Oliver and doing journalism at John Oliver. And in the comedy world, there was this concept that I heard all the time about punching up, and you were never allowed to punch down. A joke about someone who is homeless is not funny at all, but a joke about the president or someone in power is funny and I think that I've been like reckoning with that a lot. I think that we used to think that, celebrities were fair game because they're beautiful and they're wealthy. So, even if they're experiencing a hard time, we can all laugh at it because they have it great, and that's punching up. And I think that this film and other works are like allowing us to start reconsidering that. And yes, Britney Spears is beautiful and wealthy and, famous, but, is it really funny to, have laughed at, her dealing with issues and experiencing a custody battle and all of that. So I think that it's really interesting to watch if there's going to be a societal shift and people questioning their own behavior.
In the interview with Felicia, this didn't make it into the film, but I played it over and over in the editing system because I found it really moving. She said she was having trouble finding words even. She was like, Britney is so non-judgmental, like the most non-judgmental person I've ever met. She's a stop and smell the roses kind of girl, she said. And for somebody to take that away from her, it hurts. And I think what I hope people take away from this is to watch yourself when you're being judgmental, because she's, she was bullied. She was bullied and humiliated in front of the world. And I hope that we think about that, we as media people, and not be so mean-spirited. There's no reason people had to bully and humiliate Britney, and there's no reason we have to do it to other people. So I hope people come away kinder from watching it.
Mary, some thoughts?
Well, not surprisingly, I love everything that Samantha and Liz said.
Yeah.
I very much agree that, the film to me is a call to all of us to, consider the sort of humanity of all of those around us. It sounds like such a, simple sort of expression, but I think it's profoundly true. And it has the process of making the film and watching the world react to the film has influenced the way in which I receive and perceive celebrities, certainly, and public figures generally. And I am more likely now to sort of understand that, they bleed too. But I also hope that, as we've said, one of the really gratifying parts of the reaction to the film was this sort of growing sense, and then eventually this sort of sharp understanding amidst the public that there were misogynistic forces at play, certainly in the 90s and the early aughts when Britney was sort of on the rise. And we look back at the way in which she was framed then, and it's so easy for us to understand perhaps who was controlling the narrative, who were the folks who were on late night talk shows, who were the folks who were the editors in chief of these tabloid magazines. It's so easy for us to understand that and to understand the ways in which probably, not so deliberately on their part, but perhaps by dint of their lived experience, they failed to fully understand the totality. I would say arguably they failed to fully understand the totality of Britney's experience or to reach for easy jokes. And I hope that we carry that sense with us today, and that as we're absorbing the narratives around us, around public figures, certainly, but in, amongst those that surround us as well, that we ask ourselves, who's controlling the narrative and what might they be leaving out?
Well, it is eye-opening and infuriating, and I'm so glad that your film exists, and I hope that folks watch it and take all that away from it too. Thank you all, Liz and Samantha and Mary, and all the great folks at IDA. Thank you for a really, really fun conversation.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, IDA.
Thank you.